In Module 3, I'll help you with the startup automation. So you get MySQL, Redis, and everything up and running when you launch Ubuntu once your Windows computer starts up. Because Ubuntu is not running by default, or at least I've never made it enabled by default. So you will need to start up everything when you first launch the Ubuntu app. So now we make the final modification to the RC file. We add in all the commands to auto start or bootstrap all the server essentials that we need. I made a little mistake here, and I actually added the sudo MySQL at the bottom, which is actually needed when we're setting up SQL later on. So I'm going to take that out now. And instead, I'm going to add a little snippet on how to get Sublime Text working with when you have Sublime and your code loaded on the Linux file system, which I'll get into another module on how to use Sublime with Linux file system. So now that we've done that, we reload Ubuntu and put in our sudo password, and you should see that everything kind of starts up automatically. So we got FPM, Nginx, Valet, Redis, MySQL. Let's just make sure the services are running. So sudo service, I forgot the command here, but let's kind of check. Okay, it's status all. So sudo service status all. And here we should see some of the services that we loaded as part of the startup script. So we see MySQL is running, FPM, and supervisor. So we look like we are all good. Now let's set up MySQL, because we do need to make a few tweaks before we can get it working the way I like to have it working. So so let me just, for the purposes of this course, I've updated the installation text file. So we now run the sudo MySQL to get into SQL. We're now going to check, and you can see for the root user, it expects an auth socket type connection, but we want to change that to a password login, so we can use that with our with Table Plus or your database client. So here we go. We updated to root at 123, and the only thing that I need to now do is flush the privileges. And if you see, and I run the same command as before, instead of the auth socket connection, we will now see that the connection is a password based connection for the root user. So that's all we need. We can actually close this out at this point. And the next step would be to test that the password is indeed working. And once that is tested, we are done with the installation. Thank you for your time. Let's make sure this works. Root at 123 is what I used, and we're in. So to wrap up this course module, and before we get into the next module, which is to, or the next two modules, which is to discuss the pros and cons with installing your code on the Linux file system versus the Windows file system, let us just, as a quick sanity check, make sure everything we've done in Ubuntu is actually working. So I'm going to start that up, put in my sudo password, and everything's good. So I'll see you in the next module.